Our next speaker is Nick Thomas. He's been here for a few years, probably as long as I have doing this thing, 7 years. I don't know how long it's been. Yeah. He started in the music career, has his music career doing engineering and mixing for platinum artists like Destiny's Child, Celine Dion, and I have that song, so many Celine songs in my head after I read that. Carlos Santana, Ricky Martin, all the songs are in my head. Then the changing landscape of the music industry led him to transition out of pop music and launch Somatone Interactive, which opened in 2003. It began by producing audio content on a number of feature films, national ad campaigns, and AAA games, as well as casual games. And they've been around for the last 7 years, providing hundreds and hundreds of games with audio. So, Nick, we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you. Cool. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me. This is going to be a fun panel. I'm going to move pretty quickly because I actually really want to hear what Rich has to say, much more than I want to hear what I have to say. He's up next. And this is a little bit different from the other speakers in this track because I'm not a composer. I, at one point, was kind of a sound designer. I was really a mixer more than anything. But what I do is really business development and creative production. And so I sit in between producers in the developer or the publisher and my content team. And so my perspective is a little different from what you're getting from other people. I'm not really going to tell you how to make a great sounding song or how to make a great sound effect because, you know, that's tools of the trade. This is a little bit more about how to ensure that game audio in general sounds great from a little bit of a different perspective. My session's titled Fight Back Against the Mute Button because the rise of mobile gaming brings kind of a new landscape to audio production, and there's a new binary experience with audio in that it's now an on-off experience for people. You don't really sit and adjust levels within game audio. If you're lucky, they'll turn it down because, you know, things aren't quite right. But 9 times out of 10, they're just going to shut it off. And that's a big problem for people who are making content and for people who are developing games and believe in the value of audio. So I think collectively as a community, we need to raise the bar so that we are encouraging people to leave the game audio on and not kind of passively encouraging them to turn it off and retraining people. And just as a quick example before I dive in, I've got 3 kids. All of them play with the music on. They really want the music on in mobile games, and that's not as true for adults. And I think that's a really interesting comparison because as adults, we've sort of been encouraged to turn it off. As mobile games have become more present, we're becoming more and more trained to turn off mobile game audio versus kids who don't really understand or feel that need. And I have a personal stake that that's because there's been a lot of low quality audio in the space, and it's catching up now, and that's helping a lot, but I think we can do more and do better to help encourage people to leave the game on. So anyhow, Aaron gave you my rundown. I'll kind of skip over this. We do a lot of casual games, PC, mobile, social. That's really our bread and butter. We do some AAA content as well. But we work with a wide range of publishers and developers from EA and GREE all the way down to independent guys. And so we really see a lot of different pipelines and how they operate. And the content of this speech is really designed for you guys as content people. And actually, let me ask real quick, how many of you guys are content creators? Musicians, sound designers, so forth. So it's most of you. Any programmers in the room? Okay, great. Any game designers or producers? Okay, cool. So this is actually mostly geared towards game producers, but it's for the audio people to know how to approach them. So these are kind of the tools and tricks of what you as content people need to fight for in order to make sure the experience is going to be as good as possible, and also to educate people. There's a lot of people who've moved into this space that don't have a lot of experience in AAA games, and because of that, they don't really have a solid background in audio production. So they need help, they need leadership from their content people to help ensure that the game is going to sound great because they don't necessarily know. That's actually really true of casual games in general. For the sake of this conversation, we're not talking about AAA games on a mobile platform. Those aren't casual games. Those are AAA games on a mobile platform. And those people already come from a background where they understand middleware, they understand integration requirements, they understand how to approach games for a high-level result. This is really for people making casual games, all the puzzle games, city builders, sim games, all the other stuff that's kind of typical casual, which has a female demographic, which is much broader in terms of its user base. This is really the game genre that I'm speaking towards in this presentation. So why is this so important? Because sound is 50% of the experience. At least we audio people like to believe that, and I think there's a real argument for that. And so effectively, when you're shutting off the game, you're losing 50% of the experience. You're losing music, which is such a great way to connect with players and convey emotion. You're losing sound effects, which are a really important driving user feedback tool, if not just an immersion tool. Did you do well? Did you win? Did you lose? Are you losing? How did you score? When you pulled that slot machine handle, how big was your payout? Those are important aspects to convey with sound. And then voiceover, which I think is really important and too often missed in mobile gaming. There's the human connection. Anytime you add voiceover into any kind of sound effect or environmental landscape, you immediately engage on a whole nother level. It's some sort of brain kinetic experience that I think is very important. So having all these things is important, and when you turn it off, you lose them all. So what can you do to help prevent players from hitting the mute switch? And this is really for game producers. You need to manage your audio with as much thought and care as you do your design, your art, your engineering. All of those other three aspects of the kind of creative landscape of game design are approached with a great deal of thought and care. Audio tends to be the redheaded stepchild and kind of left out of that. And that's part of why quality levels are not what they ought to be. So in terms of creative game audio management, there's a few things that people really ought to do that often are missed. Mobile games offer a tremendous opportunity for a diverse range of musical styles. I think this genre, more than any other creatively, is diverse. In the console world, you're kind of limited to a much narrower genre. You've got first-person shooters and real-time strategy games and some stuff in between, but it's all pretty similar. It's kind of homogenized, which is part of why AAA gaming is not doing so well. Mobile games, on the other hand, it's anything and everything is happening in that space, and because there's so much variation there, it behooves all of us to think outside the box and try to do some really interesting creative audio experiences. The other thing that's important is to look for a high degree of audio branding in your music, sound effects design to make games sticky. You only have a limited palette to work with in mobile gaming, so having themes that really are branded to the product so that you know that game when you fire it up, so somebody else is playing it when you hear it across the room. That's really important for making games feel sticky to the player. And the other thing is what we call signature sounds. There's usually a handful of sounds, maybe 5, in a game where you have the opportunity to do something that's really creatively interesting. You can't do this too much or you're going to exhaust players. But coming up with those key signature sound events where you can really brand your game and make it that kind of wow or gotcha moment, I think is really important. Look to create something new rather than clone styles of preceding games. As content people, if you're going to work on a Candy Crush clone, don't do Candy Crush music. Do something that's really representative of what that game is all about. The art style, that's something we as content people have to push the publishing community away from, because the instinct is to just follow the herd. And when you do that with creative content, particularly music, you end up just kind of homogenizing the industry, and that doesn't do anything for anybody. Standard library sound effects and music loops are not acceptable, so there's really a quality requirement here. You can't just come up with prefab stuff. People who are out there digging through online libraries and just plug and play is part of the problem. It's part of what's sort of the deficiency in the creative approach, and that's part of what's training people to turn games off. And the last one, which is formatted wrong, the mix. This is the most important thing, probably to me because I'm a mixed person, but I think arguably anybody in this industry will tell you that if the mix is off, the game is off. And in audio from mobile, it's particularly important because it only takes that one offensive sound, that one annoying sound, or something that's too loud or too repetitive that's just hitting you in the ear, and they turn it off. And once it's off, you've lost them. They're gone. You don't hear music anymore. You don't hear the voices. You don't hear any of the other sounds. It's a binary world in mobile audio. So you have to make sure the mix is smooth all the way through, because there's such a low tolerance for turning that switch off. Okay? So for me, that's all in the mix. Even a bad sound, if it's properly mixed, is not usually offensive. But if it's too loud, if it's hitting you over the head, you're going to lose your player. And this is this content or what you need to demand from your game producers. So if you are a producer, do this. If you're an audio person, you need to require this of your game producers, because not only does this give you what you need to be successful, but it requires them to create what they usually don't have, which is primarily a vision for the audio. When it comes to art, they will come up with concept work, they'll draw references from other games, they'll have a whole kind of arc of what the art palette ought to look like. But that's very rarely done for audio by a game producer. If you're an audio lead and you get to sit in that role, that's awesome. But a lot of mobile developers and publishers don't have an audio lead. They just have a producer. So it's that person's responsibility to define this. They need to figure out what they want. And if they don't know, you need to help them figure that out. But otherwise, it's just like a guessing game. And you up the opportunity for things to not be good. It's important for producers to allow the audio designer to make suggestions, okay? The scope, the creative, the tech, the implementation. If you're in the role of being the content person, find out what's going on with the scope and make suggestions for improvement. Make suggestions on how the creative can be improved. What tech are they using? What's their integration approach? How are they going to QC it on the back end? You need to be aware of that whole pipeline, because if you're only on the front end, and as Aaron says, you just have a throw it over the wall approach, you don't know what's going to happen on the other side of that wall. If you know what the tech is, and you know what the implementation pipeline looks like, then you can start to control that process and ensure that the games are actually going to sound the way you want them to. And on that tip, proper tech integration is 50% of great audio. That's a rule of thumb in AAA gaming. I think it still applies in almost the same degree of importance, because that's where the mix gets blown. We will create a fully mixed experience for people. We'll give them music, sounds, voiceover. It's all been balanced. It's all ready to go. We hand it off, and they mess it up almost every time. They normalize it. They've got global settings, which are changing, giant parameters of the game, and so they screw it up. So you have to be vigilant that the tech and that the integration process is actually getting its due attention. And that's hard to do. I'm not gonna lie. It's hard to get the time from programmers to spend the time paying attention to that stuff. But if you're available to QC it and give them notes or get under the hood and actually make adjustments, you should do it. And lastly, make sure that they leave room in the schedule for some QC so that you have a chance to play the game before they launch it. After it launches, it's just a huge uphill fight for them to do something with a content update. Once there's like a psychological line, once a game has shipped, no one wants to go backwards. No one wants to go back to the assets that are already in there and make some fine-tune adjustments or swap out a file here and there. That ship has sailed. So you have to build in a week or two, some realistic schedule where you can get some time with the game and get some time with a programmer or a producer to make sure that it kind of gets your stamp of approval. Otherwise, you don't know what it's going to ship sounding like. And then again, the devil is in the detail, and the mix is key. So don't leave the mix to global settings in code. Don't tell, if music's too loud, you want to adjust the music cues individually. You don't want to just pull them all down. because they're all different. They're all dynamic. So these are assumptions. I'm going to just try to bullet through these so there's time for QA. But assumptions from game producers, which they should try to avoid, and you need to encourage them to try to avoid, which is, one is that timelines are short for audio production. What mobile producers like to do is wait until the game is almost done and then have a huge sprint at the back end and shove all the content in. And when you do that, you don't have time for proper creative exploration, and you certainly aren't going to have time for your QC. So you have to convince people to allow you to get engaged earlier. Usually the bottleneck is going to be scoping. How do you create a contract? How do you create a scope of work for a half-done game? And that's something you have to get creative about. There's got to be ways to approach them on a pay-as-you-go basis, or have a smaller scope so you can write that first key signature theme, a bunch of the main sounds, do a vertical slice, get that right, and then scale that out across the rest of the game. Don't wait until the very end. Small project scope is a requirement due to technical limitations. This is true and it's not. There's a lot of creative ways to solve the technical footprint. This problem is actually kind of going away on its own, the same way that PC downloadable games went away. When PC downloadable started, it was a 20 megabyte download. You probably remember that. Back in the original days of casual, it was like you got 40 sounds and 3-4 minutes of music. That was it. And then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now the games are downloading at 500 megs or whatever. So this is kind of going away as production standards go up and the App Store limitations increase. But you also don't want to let people undercut the audio, because too few assets is just going to limit the experience. I don't need a creative brief which details the audio. So again, this is assumptions that the producers are making. I kind of touched on this earlier, but a creative brief is important. If they don't have one, do it for them. Create an audio Bible. Create a one-page that lays out what it's going to be, what it's going to sound like, what your references are. Do that legwork so that everybody's aligned going in. Mobile games, game audio should be managed as a budget-driven process versus an experience-driven process. This is a huge assumption that people say, I've got X thousand dollars for my game, and that's what it's got to be. That's a really bad mentality, because you're really limiting what is the cheapest part of the whole development pipeline, which is audio, which is, again, debatably 50% of the experience. And oftentimes, the difference of a couple $100 to add those few additional sounds or bring in a voice actor is the difference between a good and a bad game. And so you have to fight for really allowing there to be enough content through a budget that you're not hamstringing the whole experience. And then these are, this PowerPoint is actually available to anybody who wants it. Just email me or through Casual Connect and I'll send it to you. But this is something that we send out to people. A lot of producers have a limited vocabulary when it comes to music. They're not very comfortable trying to define that. And so if you want to enable them to speak more clearly, you can give them this sheet. And this basically allows them to go through and answer these questions. Where is music, what is the style? Temping, we talked a little bit about this in our session, but temping is one of our, I don't know if it's a best kept secret, but it's a really important part of our process, which is to take a game, capture it, lay a bunch of music against it, and see what works. Don't just point to other games or send individual audio files. You have to marry them. You have to put them together and then see how it feels. And that's going to give everybody the best sense of what the game will sound like, assuming you go down that creative pathway. And this is kind of just more of the same. And then sound effect design. Same general concept here. What types of sounds? This is sort of some key vocabulary that's helpful for people in trying to describe what they want. So it's clear. So they're all able to communicate, what they're looking for. Again, this is just kind of enablement for the producers to help them be able to communicate with their audio person. If it's you, great, and then you guys are kind of on the same page in terms of a language. So again, the takeaway from this, audio is 50% of the experience. I think we all agree. It's a tremendous opportunity to brand your games. high quality soundtracks are the least expensive way to represent high production values in a game, and that's a fight that you want to take out there and be vigilant about. Mobile games are diverse and highly creative, so treat the audio accordingly, and high quality music and sound design create a more immersive gameplay experience, create brand loyalty with players, create sticky games, and ultimately all of that together helps make game audio sound much better. It's a much better sounding game if you can wrap some of these processes into the communication and the working relationship with a game publisher or developer, so that the whole industry in general sounds better, expectations improve, game audio improves, and people stop turning their mobile games off. So that's it. How'd I do? That's pretty good. So there's a little bit of time for QA, and then I'll turn it over. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
So especially with mobile games, you have so many different devices and they all sound different. And when you say the mix is so important, how do you deal with this stuff?
Yeah, well, that's true. I think our standard is really just to mix on one or two kind of go-to devices. I mean, everything we check on an iPhone, and that's pretty ubiquitous in mobile gaming. So if it's going to sound good through that physical speaker limitation and set, then that's about as much work. If you start trying to get 10 handsets all to sound good, you're gonna spend forever trying to EQ things. So for us, it's make it sound good on headphones, then check it against the external speakers, and then that's it. But when I mean mix, it's much more about the relationship of the assets to each other than about the handset experience and what it sounds like coming out, although that certainly is important.
Along those lines, what about mastering?
We don't tend to master. I feel like part of the problem with game audio is that it's too loud. It's not a platform that you want to overpower people with. I actually think games in general are too loud, and there's sort of a conversation in the community about game loudness, and that everyone's trying to get louder and louder and louder because everyone thinks louder is better. And in some cases that's true, but there's a real subtlety to mobile gaming. I think less is more. I think a gentler approach is much, much more conducive to the platform than an aggressive approach. And so we don't master. We may start with our loudest sound effect hitting 0, and then everything is reduced from that. But we don't try to push it all up against the wall and then fine tune it.
But I was referring more to like mastering so that it's consistent, so the mixes are consistent across all the different devices and the different speakers and things. But I think you answered that with the iPhone.
Yeah, it's usually not that complex of a process. We dial it in on our main speakers, check it on headphones, check it on an iPhone. And if it sounds good on all three, it's good to go. Cool. All right, guys. Well, that's it.